Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Mertz Crew.
Mertz Crew helps top AV companies book quality AV freelancers. Your choice, your rates. We handle contracts, insurance, and payments. You save time, cost, and reduce risk. Start today at mertzcrew.com.
Now on to the show.
So back when I first started consulting about 2006, and I left the job that I was at, and I got out there into the real world, which is outside of the bubble that I'd been in for 15 years, and I discovered the role of project managers. Now, I was aware of this before. I knew companies had project managers. I'd certainly had customers that I'd been selling to or saying, well, who's going to be my project manager? And I'm going, well, we don't have project managers. Never understood the need for them. We take care of the show. But project managers were very normal across the industry. And there was a time back right at the turn of the century where it was very fashionable for event staging companies or event production companies. We didn't call them production then, more on that later. Event staging companies to say, hey, we include project management for free because nobody knew how to sell project management. And if you needed project management and you tried to sell it to the customer, they would say, well, that's just your cost of doing business. I'm not going to pay extra above my rental for that service. I need an audio person, a slide person, a video person, a lighting person. I don't need a project manager. If you need one, you just include that for free. So people would say, hey, we don't charge for project managers. We always provide a project manager. And so that battle of, well, one, semantics, and two, it's the free car mats, right? The car dealer gives you free car mats. They weren't free. You paid for them. They just told you were free. Your project manager on a job was never free. It's built in somewhere. It's coming out of the profit. But it was treated as a value add. And I was very suspicious of this term value add. What does value add mean? Well, it's that little extra thing we do for the customer. You mean free? No, it's value add. No. You just described doing something that costs money and not charging them for it. That translates to free. Value add means free. Okay. So are you throwing it in? Is it something included? Or are you trying to say the level of service that you provide includes more value than what other companies have? And if that's what you're trying to get across, if your value add is that we're better and we pay more attention and we use better people, gosh, why don't you just say that? Well, because nobody will believe you. Nobody's going to pay you extra just because you said you're good. Right? You have to prove it to them. And then they're going to be very happy to pay the same price forever that you won the job for when you didn't charge them for that. So value add always becomes free. They're not going to pay for it later, right? So fast forward, watching this over the years, watching the convergence of the AV corporate events industry and the entertainment industry and even theater and television and film production, who are all producing an event that is either being recorded, streamed, or experienced, okay? All use very many of the same techniques and very many of the same job titles, though film did kind of go off at the deep end with some of that stuff. But the rest of us in the live audience world tend to use a lot of the same titles, and we just don't use them the same way. So let me bring this back to what I'm trying to get across today is that we don't want value add. Value add is the stuff that we promise that we're not going to charge you for. What we need is to add value. And one of the easiest ways to add value is to not add a project manager, because project managers still do not convey value to the customer. All a project manager says is, my team can't supervise themselves, so I'm going to charge you to supervise them for you, which honestly, our audience, our customers have gotten used to that. And really, they do kind of expect it. Who is going to be my project manager? I want one throat to choke. I want one person so I don't have to talk to all of these other people. And honestly, we want one person because we don't want you talking to our people either, because they're not all customer ready, if you know what I mean. So we put a project manager in there. And thankfully, many customers are happy to pay for that now. But here's the problem. We're also having that project manager do other roles. They're not just becoming project manager. Maybe now they're going to call the show, or they're filling a show position. They're doing technical direction. They're creating content on site. There's all these things that they are doing that are increasing the amount of value add, because we are usurping a much more valuable title that you could be charging money for, and adding much more value to the customer in the process of doing it. So we want added value, but we want the fees that go with that added value so that we get the added gross profit. Which brings me to the title thing. Project managers are not worth a lot of money. I'm sorry. I mean, you guys are awesome people and all that kind of good stuff. You know what I'm saying. But adding that line item to a job or a proposal is not going to rake in the big bucks. Okay. We need to add something that has more meaning to the customer. So a while back, I wrote an article about this. It had to do with the difference between a project manager and a producer role. And that's an easy jump for us because we know what a producer is, kind of. We know what a project manager is, kind of. And honestly, there's 10 more titles that fall in and around that hierarchy of event management or project management or production management, whatever you want to call it. But the article talked about, let's look at who the customer is for these roles. The more valuable the customer for the role is, the more valuable the role is. And what makes a producer valuable is their first customer is the audience. And for most of our buyers, the audience is more important than the buyer itself. Now, there are buyers out there who are just egomaniacs and they want it all to be about them. We know those people. But at the end of the day, they're having a meeting because of these people in the room and what we need them to hear. Sometimes it's what we think we need to say to them, but let's face it, what you need to say is not nearly as important if there's no one to say it to. So we hold events in person because the audience is important. So top tier of value importance to the people who are writing you a check, the buyer, is the audience. So if we can address the audience's needs, we can charge more money, and we need a title appropriate with that. Second in line is the buyer themselves. Now, the buyer could be the person assigned with buying. The buyer could represent the organization who is bringing the audience together. It can be a person, it can be an entity. Okay. Sometimes the buyer is the CEO of the organization because they authorize everything, but you never have contact with them. So we also have to serve the buyer. If we can make the buyer happy, we become more valuable. In the article, I then moved away from the audience side and then moved over to the technical side and talked about the technical crews, the suppliers that work on the events, and the technicians themselves. And then below that is the administrative functions on both the buy and the sell side, such as, accounts payable, accounts receivable, legal, compliance. Your business people have to talk to my business people. If everybody gets along, everybody gets paid. Everybody gets to close out their books and things that are really unimportant to us that do shows, but we know this stuff has to get done. But I'm going to insert a fifth piece of this right smack in the middle, and the additional buyer, additional people who are extremely important are the content creators / presenters, because sometimes they're the same people. So the people who go on stage are the people who produce content that is delivered through the audience, sometimes through a presenter on stage. That element of it, that soft center, becomes very important. And sometimes we have to serve that. So those of us who have sold to agencies like creative production companies who work for the corporation and hired us as the staging company, we know about that middle stage. We know about how important the agencies are in the middle, who oversees the agency of content creation and message delivery, how important they are. But they're not as important as the buyer, and they're not as important as the audience. Now, how are we going to create value? You need the right titles. The traditional AV model today that I find in 90% of the jobs that I see you folks doing has a project manager on it. Okay. And that project manager there is to fill in the gap between what the buyer thinks they need, what the audience needs, what the content creators need or the presenters need, and what the crew needs. And they kind of, it's a catch-all to try and create some glue between all of those things. However, project manager is not a very valuable title to do that. A more valuable title, price goes up, is the producer. So if you look at an event saying, hey, my project manager will take care of all the my supply chain that is coming in, who's taking care of your supply chain? Okay. Who's making sure your supply chain and my supply chain works together? So now we're maybe integrating the venue, the catering, the experiential marketing company that's coming in and creating an event. Whatever it might be, there's a higher level of interface that's needed, and that's where the producer falls in. So if you're looking at adding value, have an honest conversation with your customer about what's important to them. Tell me about your audience and why the audience is important. Okay. Tell me what you need as a buyer, what's going to make you happy. Tell me about who's creating the content, who has agency in the content, who's going to be happy or upset if things go well or don't go well. Okay. I know how to take care of everything else, but I need to know how to take care of these things. Okay, great. What I recommend for you, dear buyer, is that this job needs an executive producer and it needs a producer. The executive producer is responsible for all of the things in your budget. So it's probably somebody on your side. You, dear buyer, are the executive producer. Someone on your team is the executive producer. They're the ones that ultimately sign off on everything that we're going to do. They're the ones that have the last, okay on any choices that we make. That's the executive producer. If you want to have me be the executive producer, I'm happy to do that. There's a price for that. And I will tell you what my scope of work is, and I will tell you where I make decisions and where you make decisions. And trust me, if I'm executive producer, you don't get to make a lot of decisions. I'm going to hand you very small decisions and make your life easy. But we don't see executive producers a lot from where we're at unless the client brings them in. However, even an executive producer needs a producer, because once you walk into the ballroom, the executive producer is still concerned about 27 other things that have nothing to do with what's going on in the ballroom or very little. And so now you can add a producer who is closer to the audience, closer to the buyer, closer to the content creators, okay, and manages that overlap with those top three and the bottom three, which are the presenters and content creators, the technical supply chain, and the administration, the final sayers on the budget. And those are managed by your technical director or production manager. So if I have a producer, a project manager is now a worthless title. I now need a production manager. If the job is complex in that I am managing suppliers for the client as well as my own suppliers, now I need a technical director. Guess what? They're more expensive than a production manager, and they probably still need a production manager to take care of that room or that crew, or at the very least a project manager. But you know what? I take the extra $500 a day and put a production manager in there, because at this point, client's executive producer, you provided a producer who's going to make sure that we deliver the show, make sure the show gets called. Maybe they hire the show director. Maybe they are the show director. Okay. They're creating a lot of value up there in the soft services that are far away from our technicians and our equipment. Okay. But are extremely valuable to the customer because they are so close to the audience customer, the buyer customer, and the content creation and presenter customer. So they're taking care of what we call the client-facing needs. That's a very valuable expense. It's a position. It is an overall expense, not a per hour expense. There's some hourly stuff in there, but there's a huge team that might support a producer. Some of them might be on site. Okay? Some of them might not be. Some of them are behind the scenes. Some of them are only in pre-production.
So taking care of more of the client's needs is going to add value, but you've got to elevate the titles in order to do that. So the titles that I'm going to see many of you working with, if we go to a big production and there's an executive producer, there is probably a designer or art director that created the overall look and the feel of that. There's a technical director who found the technical solutions for the designer's design. The executive producer also has producers, maybe multiple producers, who are in charge of either areas, content, and those producers may have associate producers working underneath them who are in charge of this video production or this remote shoot or running the speaker ready room or whatever it might be. And all of these are customer facing folks. And then when you get over onto the technical side, the technical director might have one or more production managers managing different rooms, different venues for them. Those production managers might have project managers or department heads working underneath them on an individual venue and so on. So even on your $50,000 event, adding a producer to your production manager will take care of more things for your client. It will add profit to your bottom line. It'll make everything go better, which means it is worthwhile. And it is not, as some of you might be thinking, just a way to pad the bill, because it's not. Okay, we're getting value. We're providing value to the customer. They are paying for it, and we are taking care of three very important customers, internal customers for the project: the audience, the buyer themselves, and the content creators, which are delivering the message. The rest of that stuff we know is easy because we can do it in our sleep. That special talent stuff, those soft services, have a lot of value. Learn how to have the conversation with your client about what happens on their side of the aisle and how you can help them be more successful in their event. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast, please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Mertz Crew.